actually, let's go ahead and get this started. Tonight is Monday, April 24th. Welcome to the Planning Commission. First order of business this evening will be roll call.
Elam.
Here.
Farrell.
Here.
Keach.
Here.
Knapp.
Here.
Fick.
Here.
Ritterbush.
Here.
Smock.
Here.
Westlake.
Here.
Zobrist.
Here.
Thank you very much. Quick order of business out of order off the agenda. I just want to introduce everybody to Matt Fick, who is joining the commission this evening. Matt is got an awful lot of acumen in this stuff. I think he'll be a terrific addition to the board. He's worked with several EDCs, communities, villages. He's worked in economic development. He's worked on the municipal side. He's worked on the development side. He's really an asset for us. He's lived here for a while, and I was finally able to get him off the bench. So thanks for coming aboard. Thanks for taking the appointment, and welcome to the table.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
We'll ease you in.
All right.
Second order this evening is the approval of minutes from our regular meeting from March 27th. That packet was included. Everybody should have an opportunity to review it. If there are no questions, comments, or changes, may we have a motion to approve minutes from Planning Commission 3/27/2017.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you. Motion made. Do we have a second?
Second.
Made and second. Call when ready.
Farrell.
Yes.
Keach.
Yes.
Knapp.
Yes.
Fick.
Yes.
Ritterbush.
Yes.
Smock.
Yes.
Westlake.
Yes.
Zobrist.
Yes.
Elam.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Next order of business this evening is the public hearing section. Prior to getting into the petitions, our council will give a brief narrative regarding this section of the meeting.
Thank you. Public hearing is being held tonight pursuant to published notice. Any person wishing to address the Plan Commission will be afforded an opportunity to do so. They'll give their testimony under oath or affirmation. Any person wishing to cross-examine a testifying witness will be afforded the opportunity to do so at the discretion of our chair on matters germane to the public hearing before the Plan Commission tonight. At the conclusion of the public hearing, the Plan Commission will make its vote. The Plan Commission makes recommendations. Only the village board is responsible for final action on these matters.
Thank you very much. Public hearing this evening. First one is petition number 17-5ZA. Subject properties 105 East Monroe. Legal to follow. Miller's First Edition. Stan and Jean Glatt are requesting zoning change from B2 to R1. It is my understanding, Roger, remind me if I'm incorrect here, we have already reviewed the adjacent property on this back in last year.
Correct.
Okay, so just to remind the table, what we have here, and you can see it on the board, there is a section of B2 that is all residential currently. And it appears to Roger and I that way back in the day, this was potentially some part of a target zone for business. And then just through the way things progressed, they went a different direction. And so now we have these sections that are all still B2, but are all utilized as R1. To my knowledge, there are no high density or medium density R2, R3, or R4 in this area. So this is, to some degree, probably just maintenance. Is there anyone from the public, the petitioner, that would like to say anything to the board this evening? Yep. Go ahead and, if you could just give your name and address and swear in.
Stan Gallett. I'm 101 East Monroe.
Raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. Stan, if you could go up to the mic just so the public can hear. Just give us a brief narrative about what you're doing here and why this is before us.
About a year ago, I came before you regarding the corner property, which was at that point 300 North First. It's now 101 East Monroe because we took the house down that was on it and built another one facing the other street. The property next door became available. And we purchased it about a month ago. We would like to renovate it for my mother. And in order to get a building permit, it needs to be zoned appropriately. And it's my desire to have a residence be zoned residential.
Okay.
Any questions from the board for the petitioner this evening? The house looks great, by the way.
Thank you.
Good work. There are no questions from the table, no comments from the table. Do we have a motion to approve? The attorney has asked if anyone from the public would like to discuss this. Is there anyone from the public that would like to discuss this change in zoning? Thank you very much. Anyone from the table with a motion?
I move we approve the request.
Great, thank you very much. Motion made. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you. Call when ready.
Keach,
Yes.
Knapp,
Yes.
Fick,
Yes.
Ritterbusch,
Yes.
Smock,
Yes.
Westlake,
Yes.
Zobrist,
Yes.
Elam,
Yes.
Farrell.
Yes.
Approved.
Thank you very much. Okay, next thing this evening is we have 3 amendments and ordinance changes that have been brought before us. Roger, I would ask that as we go through these, if you could give just a brief primer on the origination of these, just so the table's aware, these ordinances are things that have been being worked on a little bit. They're being added to specific zonings within our code book, or they're being reviewed. Tonight is not a vote to put these in. It would have been potentially, but there was some scheduling issues with regard to public notification. So these are for discussion this evening. They will come back up for a vote prior to going to the council. The first one we're going to talk about this evening is regarding sign height variances along the interstate corridor. Now, this ordinance, you guys all have a copy of. There's a draft language in there. Roger, it's my understanding from reviewing the existing ordinance and reviewing this, that there's largely some verbiage changes. Substantively, what are the major changes here that we should be aware of? I didn't see anything initially that jumped out at me.
Basically, what we did, this, I don't know, in the last year that came up, there was a little bit of a conflict between this ordinance and another ordinance in our code. It wasn't quite as clear in this one. So what you see where it says notwithstanding, that part that's underlined, that last sentence,
Right.
that's what we're adding here
Right.
to this particular ordinance, so that it, now, everywhere you read in there about signs and in the interstate corridor, they're going to jive, so.
Right. So this is really a cleaning up of legal language within the
Yep.
ordinance itself to make it probably more open for less interpretation.
Right,
And a
yeah.
little bit more direct.
Yep,
Okay,
exactly.
terrific. So we're going to go down and hit these each one by one. So petition number 7, petition ordinance marking amendments regarding sign height variances in the interstate corridor as set before you. The way I think we should handle this, and council, please let me know, since we can't vote on it this evening, should we make a formal recommendation to vote next meeting, or is that just assumed?
It's going to be back on as a public hearing next meeting,
Okay.
regardless of action tonight. So I'd say it'd be appropriate tonight if you have any questions or concerns, or in advance of next meeting to make those known.
Perfect. All right. So what we'll do then is we'll just go ahead and briefly have discussion over these, and we'll then run through them, and then we'll just assume they're going to be on the docket for next month. So let's move on to make the ordinance regarding firearm resale shops and firearm ranges. This is an amendment to Title 10. This is, in fact, a new classification within the zoning ordinance. There is not currently in our language, as I understand it, anything that deals with firearm ranges specifically. I read through the ordinance. It looks fairly in line with ordinances I have seen in other communities locally. Roger, I'd like, if you don't mind, just to give kind of a brief discussion of the process. This is going to be a special use.
Correct.
And so understand that as a petitioner comes before us to do this, because it's in the ordinance now, it's allowed as a business type. But they still will have to come before this board first to discuss how they plan to implement it, where they're doing it, what they're doing. But they will be allowed to now review these types of businesses in these specific zonings.
We had, what we actually had was a resident inquire as to opening up a range, but we don't have a mechanism in our ordinance right now to allow that. So when talking to Pat, he put together this as well as the retail firearm sales, so that both of them would require a special use permit. They would be reviewed, as you mentioned, by you, and then recommendation to the village board, who would have the final approval on such matters. So, and the only thing I'd mention to you, I think there's going to be a couple little changes when you actually see it next month. The first one is on the first page where it says under 10-6-3 would be B2, then general business district.
Okay, yeah.
We would just add that B2 in there. And then the second page where it's under 10-7B would just be removed, because right now, the way our ordinance is set up, if it's a special use in B1,
In
you
B1 or
can
2.
ask for it in B2 or 3 or right on down the line, clear through industrial. So it's kind of redundant to have that one in there, so that won't be in what you actually vote on next month.
Okay. In the review process from the city on a potential petitioner for either firearm store resale or a potential range, are we going to be guided in-house by our own building requirements, or are we going to be led by federal, or how are we going to work on that from a procedural standpoint, so that we know by the time it comes to us that the owner has gone before the city and worked with you?
Well, Pat, you can correct me if I'm wrong here. We could go through our process and you would find, do you think this particular property, wherever it might be, is suitable to be used for, one, a retail shop or a range? And if so, go through your process. But before we would actually let that happen, there's certain requirements that they have to have they got to satisfy EPA things.
Right.
And there's some things that we're going to want to look at, like sound and those types of things, to make sure that they are
Good for the community.
yeah, right. It's not going to be a hindrance to somebody around them, so.
Right. Which is also on us to some degree. Obviously, the ordinance will set the table to allow someone to sit at it, but it's still up to us to sort of decide in here if they're handling it correctly. One recommendation I'm not putting out there necessarily as something that we have to look at, but Pat and I will talk about this too. I have seen in other communities that the special use permitting, as it currently sits, goes with the property. And when we have specific uses like this, it's almost as if the property itself, we might need to tie it to business ownership in some way, shape, or form as well, only because the credentials of the owner might be the overarching defining thing here. If that individual has gone through all sorts of federal review and has proven themselves to be an extraordinarily worthy and capable individual running this business, what we have to be careful of to some degree is, can they then off-sell this property, be no longer involved, and then are we opening ourselves up to potential future liability? I only bring that up, and I'll pass it along to you. There was some case law up in the Naperville area of that. But other than that, the ordinance looks pretty simple. I mean, you guys have it in front of you. Hopefully you've reviewed it. Are there any questions or comments regarding the zoning that we're choosing here? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I just had a question in general about this. Will this distinguish an indoor range from an outdoor range, or is an outdoor range even, that's not even an option in the incorporated area, I would think, so.
Not that I wouldn't think it would be. Our intention is an indoor range.
That was the contemplation when drafting it. I don't see anything in the text that would prevent somebody from applying for an outdoor range, but I can't imagine any scenario in which you would be inclined to grant that.
Right, but you could overtly just say that and rule it out in the ordinance if we wanted to.
Certainly could.
Okay.
Probably the only, on a far outlying area of your boundaries, there might be a few unique properties where it could be reasonably situated, but
Okay.
we can certainly eliminate that altogether.
And that was a good question. I mean, I think part of the decision here we're going to have before us next week is, do we want to allow potentially someone who has an outlying area to even bring it before this board for review, or do we want to annex that idea altogether? And so do think on that, guys. It's almost nice to some degree that we've got this to come before us so we don't have to push it, because I think it's probably worth reviewing a little bit. I think it's a good thing. I think it would be an interesting addition to our community, and it's something that you don't find for quite some, I mean, you've got to travel quite a ways to find a good indoor range. So it could be a positive for the community, and I understand why it's before us. So these are good comments. Make sure that,
Can I ask a question?
I don't know, I mean, yeah, I guess so. Jeff
we do-
Keach, everyone.
We have a couple firearm shops in town already. So under this ordinance, they would have had to come to us. But before this ordinance, the firearm shop.
Would have been a
just
retail.
Just
Right.
was like retail, okay.
Yep.
So there's nothing that, in this ordinance, that's going to require our existing firearm dealers to have to go through any hoops?
Correct. Yeah, it's not retroactive to them. It would be
Okay.
punitive to do so. So
All right.
they're sort of
Okay.
grandfathered, if you will.
Okay.
Any other questions, or is it a good discussion, guys?
I have maybe one more. Do our ordinances extend beyond the incorporated area? I know sometimes we've had action that was outside of the city limits. Would this pertain to that as well?
We have, within a mile and a half of the corporate
Right.
boundaries, if the county has a zoning case, they request our comment and our feedback within that range. That wouldn't, that's an advisory role that we play to the county as they make decisions on variances and special uses within that area of influence we have.
Okay.
What we've tended to do in other instances is if we have a particular use that's prohibited by our ordinances, we've notified the county recently. There was a video gaming
yeah.
parlor that requested a special use from the county within our area of influence. We provide that as pointed feedback to the county when they act. So, and the direct answer to your question is, to some extent, yes,
Okay.
this would affect our sphere of influence that mile and a half outside our jurisdictional boundaries.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other discussion on the firearm ordinance before moving on? Again, this will be before us at the next meeting, so certainly other questions can come up then, but if there are substantive questions that you want answers on prior to that, this is a good time to bring them up. Okay. Moving on. The next ordinance up for review this evening, the final one, is an amendment regarding removal of signs, section 1094 of the municipal code. Pat can describe this change for us. It's, again, I believe this is structural to some degree.
Probably a matter of attorney semantics. I didn't like the way it was worded, the way it used to be worded. It was convoluted and the dates stacked, the deadlines stacked on top of each other, and you really had to read it closely to understand when your operative deadlines were to act. And so we felt like a revision of that would be in order to clarify the code. There's no intention of making a substantive change. The timeline to remove the sign, to go to a blank face isn't changing. We're just writing it in what I feel to be a much more clear fashion than prior code.
Any questions from the table this evening about this ordinance?
I had a question. So the 365 days, that's already in effect? That's already the way it's written?
Yes.
Was there any thought about dialing that back to 6 months? That just seems like a long time to have a sign sit abandoned.
Yeah, and this would be the time if there is a desire. The intention when I wrote the ordinance was, or what drove me to write the ordinance was my concern about the present wording. Substantively, I think that's up to you guys for direction on whether you want to revise the time frame. Now would be the time to do it.
Yeah, it's open for review. I will, this is where Matt and I always lock corners. I will mention that part of the issue with this, and just bear this in mind, is from a commercial improvement standpoint, a vacant space is already a bad thing. And the landlords oftentimes are losing money. If they are then to remove the sign sooner than 1 year, and the current average time on market, I think most commercial real estate agents would tell you, is longer than 1 year. It just is. The market in retail is, as you guys know, is slow. So we also have to balance this, I hate to use the word again, but without being punitive against them, because we've got a lot of vacancies currently. So we have to sort of find some balance in between. It used to be you could have someone back in that property so quick that you really just need to get the sign facing down. But that has changed in the last couple of years. And the one thing I would say is changing a sign facing is something that they have to do no matter what. They've got a new tenant, they've got a new business. Taking down posts and poles and re-drilling and all that, that can be a substantial expense to a landlord, and it might be the difference in getting that tenant in. So I'm certainly not trying to guide the table, but I want us to be aware of the current market. We don't want to inadvertently create more hazards for Morton. I would say the primary thing with this ordinance right now is it being enforced? And, you know, to some degree, I think we've been trying to be gentle and careful with property owners. So, you know, the verbiage that we put in here should stand, but we also are still a community, and I think there's always opportunities to slide things if we need to. So, if you feel those changes are necessary, bring them to the table next month for sure.
Could is there a way to do something that incentivizes them to take it down, or to, you know, to take it down?
Yeah.
For example, I mean, could there be some kind of a fee that you pay for a sign that's up beyond 6 months, or something like that? You know, that, and I know it may be difficult to collect on that, but I'm just saying they might consider it worthwhile to pay the fee for a while,
Right,
instead of taking it down.
If it makes more sense to them, time value money.
Right, right. So, and, you know, we would pay for your truck right out there, Roger, to look at the sign and see if it's down yet.
We already get, I mean, as you can imagine, if you're the property owner and you have, say, for example, we're out on the interstate and you have one of these 73 or 74 foot tall interstate signs, and we've had people have to take those down. Now they can't even ask for the variance
can't
to
put it
put
back
them
up.
back up.
Yeah.
And even some of the shorter ones, I mean, even in a year, they're less than happy with me that they have to take their sign down, and they don't understand that, but
This is the hard part of municipal government. I mean, we got to find the balance between maintaining a quality community that we're all proud of, and also not being xenophobic or prohibitive to businesses who are, you know, currently struggling. Our interstate corridor right now is troubled. It just is. We have a series of empty, vacant properties that have been empty and vacant for some time. We've got a lot of properties on market in that area. So I think it's a good conversation, and I do believe we need to try to find some kind of a balance in between. And I know, Roger, all these conversations lead to fun phone calls for you. But,
that's
you know,
what I get paid for, though.
that's
so-
right. That's why you make the big bucks. But I do think it's important that we have this dialogue.
I just have a quick comment. It seems to me like there should be maybe a distinction between taking the sign down and taking down all the poles and braces and that whole framework. It seems like a lot to ask somebody to do within 1 year when they're trying to sell the property. The sign might be one thing that would need to come down, but
Right.
to me, and there should be maybe be some distinction between taking the sign down versus the whole 70-foot pole or whatever.
So as it currently sits, the sign does come, the facing is what that's referred to, and it does come down. It comes down earlier. You have 60 consecutive days without that tenant before the facing comes down. So it is separated, and then 365 days of continuous vacancy before they are to remove the structure. So there is that distinction currently.
I thought the facing was just the blank, like you could
Right.
put a blank over the top but not really remove the sign.
Well, okay, I see what
Blank
you're
it
saying.
out.
Yeah, that's true. Although some of these signs are built that structurally they require,
Yeah.
that facing, especially the taller ones. Okay, so some distinction might help. Any other comments from the table that we can bring to next meeting?
Not within this ordinance, but somewhere in the code, is there something that would enforce, you know, that the condition of the sign itself, that you could, within, prior to a year, go out and make them replace it or maintain it or do something to it?
Yeah, you have to, they have to be maintained, and,
Okay.
you know, we don't want pieces hanging off of them like we have on one right now.
Right.
We
Yeah,
have
flaky
other
and
issues
breaking.
going there, so,
Yeah.
yeah.
What is the typical process, Roger, for you as far as trying to manage these? You know, I mean, how does that, is it currently public awareness calling you up? Is it, I mean, it's hard for you to know that the moment that someone's gone.
Typically, what I would do, if when I see one that's closed, whatever the business might be, I might go to our utility people.
Yeah, there you
In
go.
our office, the ladies up front, and say, when did they terminate service? And you can tell by looking at the usage of water, gas, whatever it might
bet.
be. And then that's the date that I kind of use for, okay, on April 1st, you were no longer in operation. And then I send them the letter with a copy of our current ordinance, which needs interpretation. And you have to do the math to figure out when, and you get the calendar out and look at it, you know, from the expiration of the first 14 days of when it was closed. And this is going to make it much easier. But then we notify them and say, here it is. In 60 days now, you have to have that sign face blanked out. And at the end of 365 days, the entire sign, pole, structure, everything must be
Comes down.
removed. So.
And Pat, as it's currently set up, I know one of the arguments I've seen in other communities from time to time is, well, yeah, it's vacant, but I have a 3-year remainder term on the lease. The end user just went dark. The way this is written currently, it doesn't matter. If you have a 5-year lease and the tenant goes dark in year 2, they are now gone. And so the timeline starts then, not at the end of the lease.
Correct.
Yeah, when there's no longer that business being conducted there,
Right.
then it's, sign's got to go.
Any other comments or questions? Okay. Appreciate the discussion, guys. I think, like I said, if you've got things that you want to bring up, absolutely bring them to next meeting. Otherwise, just know that we will, unless there's some distinct change that either council gets into or the city, these will be voted upon in our May meeting. So be ready for that. Okay, that should end the public hearing portion of our meeting. We can move on to other business now. I see you've got a nice addition to our packet here, rules of procedure for the Planning Commission, which is terrific. I've ignored 3 of these this evening that I can see right out of the gate. I will do better and at least get 10 of them. Pat, will you go through, just kind of give us a brief summary here? Obviously, these are for our use, and specifically, I would say, guys, we've been in this situation before. What this really helps us with is during the hearing procedures, specifically cross-examination, how that can be handled.
Yeah, and these are something that, another kind of fresh eye suggestion to improve practice and to give us a little bit more teeth to control the public participation portion of contested hearings. What we're going to end up doing is pairing this with an ordinance. We have to have an ordinance that allows you to adopt these rules. So this is kind of another first read item. And what I intended to do is set out to write rules that were logical, that made clear for the petitioner what their obligations would be coming before you. It clarified some of our procedures on how we handled written evidence, telling people how many copies they need to bring of documents and how we'd handle admissibility. It also cemented in writing one of the issues we've dealt with before, which is written statements. Kind of the rule of thumb we've always operated under is if somebody's not here to be cross-examined and to speak for themselves, we don't take any weight in a written statement in support or in opposition to a candidate or a petitioner, excuse me. So basically the rule set up that we can amend these from time to time, but this is how we're basically going to do things. It's pretty consistent with how we've done things in the past. You give your testimony under oath or affirmation. It talks about and cements who can cross-examine and who can't. That's been an issue where usually the people who want to cross-examine aren't necessarily within that sphere of 250 feet. So I think that'll narrow the group who we have to deal with on those requests. So that's the Cliff's Notes version, a Reader's Digest version of what I've proposed here. And again, it's just trying to clean up and probably give us a little better written script for the way we've kind of always done things.
Yeah, which is very much appreciated, because when those situations do arise, and it's rare, it's nice to have a playbook. The one thing that I saw right out of the gate that I just wanted to, I don't know how we manage this, but you just hit on it. The people from the public who would want to cross-examine, clearly they're to give their name and address, but in an instant, it's very hard for me at least to figure, oh, they're within the radius of proper consent for cross-examination. Is there going to be a method?
Well, we can
can
do it
use?
right here.
Yeah.
I mean,
All
I've
right.
got the GIS map on here, and I can click on it and measure.
Is that not it?
And it's basically the
And
notice
they're on
list.
the.
So
that's
the
list.
notification hits it, right? So we just have to quickly look and see if that person's on there.
Yeah, and that's why we did that 250 feet, is because that's the same standard we use for our,
For the
our
clarification,
notice
yeah, all
list. So,
And then we all are on the same page here that if someone needs to be removed, Jeff Keach
This is the removal.
will handle it. Okay. All right, no, I think this is terrific. I'm glad you put this together. I really appreciate it. We'll, you know, is this something that, you know, obviously we need to put an ordinance together. So this, to my understanding, is not something we're voting on this evening because this does not have ordinance language with it.
Correct.
All right, so this is just for our review. So, you know, take it, make notes, have thoughts, questions, et cetera, and this will come up at a future meeting for us to review again. Next
probably
meeting.
next month, yep.
You're working a lot lately, aren't you?
Well, a lot of things coming together at once.
Terrific. Okay, so
Roger, do the petitioners get a copy of these procedures when they're, you know, during their process, when they're applying and so forth, just so that they are aware of that?
Well, I mean, we haven't used it yet, but we could.
I mean, when we get it
Yeah.
all finalized?
yeah, would that be proper to hand that out as a part of the packet?
Sure.
I feel like,
It could even be
Information's
available here
positive.
too for public people, members of the public.
yeah, I think that's great.
I don't know how many years ago Steve Newhouse put together it was particularly for the Plan Commission, but I use it for both the Plan Commission and the ZBA. It kind of gives the petitioner an idea of what they need to do,
Yes.
because we would, not often, but once in a while, we'd get a petitioner that would come in here and stand there and say nothing. And it's like, this is your time to either sell this thing or it's going down the river. And, you know,
And they weren't aware.
and they didn't do what they needed to do. So now it kind of gives you a guideline of how to prepare and what types of things are important to think about. And so we give them that, and we can most certainly include that as well.
I think it's great. I think information is a smart thing to do, and if we have it on the website too, when they go to get the packets, I think that'll be probably real good when that website's back up and running.
It's going to be real soon, too, by the way.
All right, okay.
So you can quit calling me
Hold on a
every other
minute.
day.
That's the 6th time I've heard real soon. Okay, good conversation, guys. Nothing else in other business this evening. Roger, we've exhausted you. You got anything for us?
No, I've said more than I needed to.
Trustee Belsley, anything from the trustees tonight? Okay, terrific. Once again, Matt, welcome. Thanks for coming and having some conversation immediately. Do we have a motion to adjourn? You want to step up? Do we have a second? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Thanks, guys.